10 Breakfast Truce. He crept downstairs and the house was still asleep. He decided to cook breakfast for himself and his cowboy and Indian. He was quite a good cook, but he'd mostly done sweet stuff before, however, any fool he felt sure could fry an egg. The steaks were out of the question, but beans were no problem. So Omri put butter in the frying pan on the stove and the fat began to smoke. And Omri broke an egg into it, or tried to, but the shell, instead of coming cleanly apart, crumpled up somehow in his hand and landed in the hot fat mixed up with the egg. Not as easy as he thought. Leaving the mess to cook, shell and all, he got a tin of beans out of the cupboard and opened it without trouble. Then he got a saucepan and began pouring the beans in. Some of them got into the egg pan somehow and seemed to explode. Doesn't sound like he's a very good cook, does it? He hasn't done it much. The egg was beginning to curl and the pan was still smoking. Alarmed, he turned off the heat. The center of the egg still wasn't cooked and the beans in the pan were stone cold, but the smell in the kitchen was beginning to worry him. He didn't want his mother coming down, so he tipped the whole lot into a bowl, hacked a lopsided slice off a loaf of bread, and tiptoed up the stairs again. Little Bear was standing outside his longhouse with hands on hips waiting for him. "You bring food?" he asked in his usual bossy way. "Yes." "First, Little Bear won't ride." "Well, first you must eat it while it's hot. I've been to a lot of trouble to cook it for you," Omri said, sounding like his mother. Little Bear didn't know how to take this, so he burst into a rather forced laugh and pointed at him scornfully. "Omri cook, Omri woman," he teased. But Omri wasn't bothered. "All the best cooks are men," he retorted. "Come on, you're going to eat with Boone." Little Bear's laughter died instantly. "Who Boone?" "You know who he is, the cowboy." The Indian's hands came off his hips, and one of them went for his knife. "Oh, knock it off, Little Bear. Have a truce for breakfast, otherwise you won't get any." Leaving him with that thought to chew over, Omri crossed to the crate in which Boone was grooming his white horse with a wisp of cloth he'd found clinging to a splinter. He'd taken off the little saddle, but the bridle was still on. "Boone, I brought something to eat," said Omri. "Yup, I thought I smelt something good," said Boone. "Let's get to it." Omri put his hand down. "Climb on." "Aw, shucks, where am I going? Why can't I eat in my box where it's safe?" whined Boone. But he clambered up onto Omri's palm and sat grumpily with his back against his finger. "You're going to eat with the Indian," said Omri. Boone leapt up so suddenly he nearly fell off and had to grab hold of the thumb to steady himself. "Heck no," he says, "I ain't. You just put me down, son, you hear? I ain't sharing victuals with no lousy, scalp-snaffling Injun, and that is my last word." It was, as it happened, his last word before he was set down within 6 inches of his enemy on the seed tray. They both bent their legs into crouches, as if uncertain whether to leap at each other's throats or turn and flee. Omri hurriedly spooned up some egg and beans and held it between them. "Smell that," he ordered them. "Now you eat together, or you don't get any at all, so make up your minds. You could start fighting afterwards if you must." He took the bit of clean paper and laid it like a tablecloth under the spoon. Then he broke off some crumbs of bread crust and pushed a little into each of their hands. Still with their eyes fixed on each other's faces, Indian and the cowboy sidled toward the big steaming bowl of food from opposite sides. Little Bear, after hesitating, was the first one to shoot his arm out and dip the bread into the egg. The sudden movement startled Boone so much he let out a yell and started to run, but Omri's hand was blocking the way. "Don't be silly, Boone," he said firmly. "I ain't being silly. Them Injuns is just ornery and savage. Them's dirty, and I ain't eating from the same bowl as no—" "Boone," said Omri quietly, "Little Bear is no dirtier than you. You should see your own face." "Is that my fault? What kind of hallucination are you anyway, telling me I'm dirty when you didn't bring me no washing water?" So here they are, these enemies. And there's that spoonful of food in between them. That was a fair complaint, but Omri wasn't about to lose an argument on a side issue. "You can have some breakfast. You can have some after breakfast, some washing water. But if you don't agree to eat with my Indian, I'm going to tell him your nickname." Do you remember what his nickname is? Boo-hoo Boone. "Well, you can't have that ain't fair," said the cowboy. "That plum ways ain't no fair," he said. But hunger was getting the better of him anyway, so grumbling and swearing under his breath, he turned back and marched to the side of the spoon. By this time, Little Bear was seated cross-legged on the piece of paper, a hunk of bean in one hand and a mess of egg in the other, eating heartily. Seeing this, Boone lost no time in tucking in, eyeing the Indian, who ignored him. "Where's my coffee?" he complained after he'd eaten a few bites. "I can't start the day till I had my jug of coffee." Omri had completely forgotten about coffee, but he was beginning to get pretty well fed up about being bossed around by these ungrateful little men. So he settled down to eat the remains of the food. And simply said, "Well, you're going to have to start today without one." Little Bear finished his breakfast and stood up. "Now, we fight," he announced, and he reached for his knife. And Omri expected Boone to leap up and run, but he didn't. He just sat there munching his bread and his beans. "I ain't finished yet," he said, "and I ain't going to fight till I'm plumb full of victuals. So you can just sit down and wait, Redskin." Omri laughed. "Good for you, Boone. Take it easy, Little Bear. You don't forget your promise." Little Bear scowled, but he sat down again. Well, Boone ate and ate, and it was hard not to suspect after a while that he was eating as much and as slowly as possible to put off the last moment when he would have to fight. At last, very reluctantly, he scraped the last bits of egg from the spoon, wiped his hands on the sides of his trousers, and stood up. Little Bear was on his feet immediately. Omri stood ready to part them. "Look a here, Injun," said Boone. "If we're going to fight fair. Probably ain't a word for fair in your language, but I'm here to tell you, with me it's fight fair or don't fight at all. Little Bear fight fair, kill fair, scalp fair. Well, you ain't going to scalp nobody, and unless you're going to take it off with your teeth." For an answer, Little Bear raised his knife, which flashed in the morning light, and Omri, his hands on his knees, waited. "Yeah, I see it. But you ain't going to have it much longer, and why ain't you? Because I ain't got one. I only got my gun, and my gun's plumb run out of bullets. What I got, and all I got, is my fists. Oh, and one other thing. I got my hallucination here." He waved a hand at Omri without taking his eyes off Little Bear for a second. "And I know he don't want to see this here purty red scalp of mine hanging on no stinking redskin's belt. So if I fight, it's going to be fist to fist, face to face, man to man, Injun. Did you hear me? No weapons, just us two. And let's see if a white man can't lick a red man in a fair fight. Lesson maybe, just maybe, you ain't red at all, but you're yeller. That means, are you a coward?" And Boone stepped around the bowl of the spoon, threw his empty gun on the ground, and put up his fists like a boxer. Little Bear was nonplussed. He lowered his knife and stared at Boone. Whether Little Bear had completely understood the cowboy's strange speech was doubtful, but he couldn't mistake the gesture of throwing the gun away. And as Boone began to dance around, fists up, making little mock jabs towards his face, Little Bear was getting madder and madder. He made a sudden swipe at him with his knife, and Boone jumped back. "Oh, you naughty Injun, I see I'm going to have to set my hallucination onto you." But Omri didn't have to do anything. Little Bear had gotten the message. Throwing down the knife in a fury, he hurled himself onto Boone. What followed was not a fist fight or a wrestling match or anything so well organized. It was just an all-in, no-holds-barred two-man war. They rolled on the ground, pummeling, kicking, and butting with their heads. At one point, Omri thought he saw Boone trying to bite. Maybe he succeeded because Little Bear suddenly let him go, and Boone rolled away swift as a barrel down a slope and onto his legs, and then, with a spring like a bow-legged panther, onto the Indian again, feet first. And Little Bear let out a noise that's like, "Oof!" And he caught Boone by both ankles and heaved him off, and Little Bear picked up a clod of compost and flung it after him, and catching him full in the face, and then Little Bear got up and ran at him, and it was holding both fists together and swinging him like he had swung a battle axe, and they caught the cowboy a heavy whack in the ear, which sent him flying to one side, and as he flew, he caught Little Bear a blow in the chest with one boot, and that left them both on the ground. The next moment, each of the men found himself pinned down by a giant finger. "All right, boys, that's enough," said Omri, in his father's firm end-of-the-fight voice. "It's a draw. Now you must get cleaned up for school." What do you think about taking them to school? Good idea? Bad idea?